I'm joined now by Devon Archer, who, well, I don't want to reduce his life to this phrase, but Hunter Biden's former business partner. And yet if he wasn't, he probably wouldn't be here. But I'm glad he is. We're going to talk. And hello, Devon. Thanks for coming on The Gist.
Thank you.
I want to talk about four main topics: your history background with Hunter, your testimony before the House Oversight Committee, what you've been trying to do to get a pardon, and then your reflections on how you were described, how you were treated, just the truth, the accuracy of the entire recitation of the story. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So you meet Hunter. You're a Yale graduate. You're from not too far where I'm from on Long Island. You're North Shore. I'm South Shore. So that's like a knife fight. That's like East Coast, West Coast beef. But you graduate from Yale. You go into business. Your business partner is Chris Hines, who's who's
Rosemont Capital.
Rosemont Capital, and Hines is he's the son of the ketchup people, or the grandson, and Teresa Hines, Kerry's son, and John Kerry's stepson.
Correct.
And so he was a friend of yours? Did he have many skills beyond being a Hines, would you say?
No, he was a very, very intelligent guy. Talented, also a good friend to start. So I met him in college. Actually, the first day I got to Yale in 1992. The fall of 92, I ended up arriving on the at the practice field of Yale lacrosse, went to a captain's practice, and ended up, after having moved into the dorm with my parents, jumping in a Cherokee and driving out to Nantucket. So that was the beginning of our friendship.
Yeah. So you're like, I'm really at Yale.
Yeah, exactly.
This is really Yale.
It was really Yale. And I also didn't know where Nantucket was at the time.
Right.
Even being from Long Island. So that was the mystery.
You've heard the limericks, but never.
Exactly.
So now Hunter Biden's also a Yale law grad,
He's
right?
at Yale Law.
Yeah.
There's like some speculation or some stories that we had met while I was there. I don't recall, but that's the folklore, is that we had met one or two times.
So you cannot
I can't deny
it, but
exactly.
He's in your orbit, but not some guy you knew. And so you go into business with Chris Hines. Right. And the name of the firm is
Rosemont Capital.
Rosemont Capital.
Which was named after the Hines family farm or residence in Rosemont in outside of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I've been there. Fox Hollow, is that the name of it? I did a campaign event there or something. Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't
beautiful property.
It is nice. Wow, I didn't realize that. So then you get into some other ventures, and tell me when you start talking to Hunter Biden as a business partner.
Yeah. So what happened was it was 2008, and he was, I'm going to get the dates correct, but it was 2008, and he was basically had to scale down or shut down his lobbying firm.
Because he was a lobbyist. He was a registered official lobbyist.
Exactly.
And so what he has to do is, because in 2008, his dad's going to become vice president, it's a bad look, or maybe even worse, from to be a lobbyist. He has to transition into something like a strategic advisor.
Right. Certainly from the Democrat Party.
Yeah.
It's a bad look, but I think they're not realists. But at the end of the day, what happened was he had to scale it down. So it wasn't immediate after 2008, but we were reintroduced. I'd met him a couple times in the past at, I think, at LA, at the DNC in LA, and then following that in 2004, and had come across him. So we'd shaken hands and seen each other, not allegedly. We'd actually met and had been at a dinner or two that I remember at certain points. Couldn't put a date on it.
Yeah.
But in 2000, I think it was probably late 2008, 2009, beginning of 2009. It's not immediate. It's not like, okay, you have to close your doors, because it was his livelihood. But he was in the process of shutting down. Unwinding. Exactly. Yeah. So that was a process. And so one of his attorneys, actually, who was working on some business for him, was friendly with another guy that worked at Rosemont, and he put us together. And so we had a meeting, we had a lunch meeting that ended up going, he basically laid out, he said, listen, this is what I have to do. I can't be a lobbyist, but if I'm in the private equity world, I can still continue to keep some of my clients on the strategic advisory, DC insider stuff. And I can, but if I'm on the investment side, it's not necessarily lobbying if you own shares of a company, right? So there's an element of, if you're an owner, if you're an active owner, if you're a passive owner, I don't know where those lines kind of demark. It's not like you buy one share of Apple and then go
and it's game on.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a gray area that I'm not, completely educated on. But there is an element that if you are an owner and you're, private equity companies or companies can advocate for, advancing their businesses. And I think he saw that as a way where he was not, calling on the Hill anymore. So the official, lobbying acts of like, going up to Capitol Hill and talking to a congressman or a senator about a particular issue, a particular appropriations, a bill, that was out of their, and I don't know how much of that they actually did, predating kind of Rosemont Seneca partners, which is what it became. And so that the attorney and Hunter, we sat down for a lunch. It lasted a very sober lunch, I should mention, and lasted for hours.
And at this point, you had, though a registered independent, you had raised funds for Democrats?
I had, yeah. I was national finance co-chair for John Kerry in 2004
because of your connection to
that
his
was
son,
kind of like
stepson,
in a kitchen cabinet type of role.
Gotcha.
So I had come out of I'd come out of Citibank. I was in Asia for a while, and I was at New England Financial. We were purchased by MetLife, and then I had started a tech company out of that, sold it. So I was in the sale process leading up to the campaign in 2004. So just timing wise, I didn't work for the campaign, but I was I had enough financial independence that I could volunteer and run around the country. And at that time, it was an incredible way to meet. I'm a wanderlust kind of at heart, and just travel around the country raising $2,000 checks because it was kind of pre-internet and it was pre-super PACs, and the money flows were not these small, big campaign or big events that cause lots of small donors or, big, mega donors that come in with super PACs that align perfectly with campaign strategies. This was like you're out there organizing fundraisers, doing tours, doing surrogate tours, and raising checks $2,000 at a time.
So your self-conception at this time is you're a finance guy. You do some fundraising for a friend of yours whose dad is, your business partner whose dad happens to be running for president, but you don't see yourself as becoming, or do you see yourself, maybe I'll be some sort of Democratic fundraiser full-time. This is not what you wanted.
No.
And how much of the activity to raise funds, political funds, helped your business in any way? Or was it totally ancillary?
No, I definitely think it helps your business, because you're just coming across, you're in private equity, you're in a business where you're identifying assets that you think are going to grow and that are going to make people money. So if you're meeting, thousands of people that are writing $2,000 checks, a number of those will be high net worth or have family offices that can end up investing in your next
and
fund.
People are saying
initiative.
Devon's a connected guy. Devon knows the right people. That's part of it.
Absolutely.
And none of this is underhanded, by the way.
No.
None of this is even what Hunter's trying to do at that point. What are you going to immiserate the children of politicians? They have to earn a living. He's a Yale trained lawyer. So
right. Exactly. It made sense. Listen, it was, the biggest mistake of my life, but on paper, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Very attractive person to go into business with. What did you think he brought to the table at the time?
So at the time, I thought we could expand really expand our network in regards to raising capital. I also thought that, given his proximity to his father, which is a very, very loving and tight relationship and to this day. And I thought that, that proximity and that ability to both, there were two things. It's about reaching out and, developing a bigger network to raise capital around for whatever fund you're raising at the time. So more introductions and more, access to pensions. He had claimed earlier that he had deep relationships with pensions, and we would be able to kind of take our fund, Rosemont at the time, which was a boutique. It was multi-strat, but it was boutique, and then take that into kind of the institutional world and start to raise capital.
So much money there.
Exactly.
You could get CalPERS. If you could get even the Arkansas Firemen's Fund, there's money there.
Exactly. So I think that there was an idea that we could get into the institutional capital world, and that's how Blackstone really broke out, which is now the second largest asset manager in the world.
Do you think he was bullshitting you at the time?
No, I think he had the. No, I think he definitely had the relationships.
And did he have skills? Did he have discernible skills?
Well, I think that's it. As far he had as many skills as the most successful lobbyist in DC.
Right. Okay.
So
that's
I think
good.
I think there were skills.
But like when you would sit down and talk, and tell me if you did, when you would look at a financial sheet and when you would talk strategy, was he right there with you? Did he need hand holding? Was he sharp and a valued brain, a valued intellectual asset in the strategy you were discussing?
From an investment side, no. He was He was very astute in regards and knowledgeable about the strategy and how to plug the DC component into it. Right. So if a particular company had a regulatory issue, that could be, you know, that required legislation or appropriations that would help sway, he would know the path on how to.
Okay, that's something, right? It's often opaque, and he would know this guy used to work at this committee.
This is his issue.
This is the way in, and there's a lot of regulations. He would actually know the regulations.
He had a team actually. So it was not just, you know, what we did when Rosemont Capital continued and lived its entire life as an independent entity of Rosemont Seneca Partners. The press and the years of coverage of this have kind of merged this into having been some big kumbaya partnership. And really what it was, we never invested in Rosemont Seneca Partners. He really just took the name Rosemont, which was the prefix of Rosemont Capital, put it in front of Seneca Partners, which was the advisory firm that he had been winding out of from the lobbying firm. And it became Rosemont Seneca Partners. And we had an economic relationship where if they made over a certain amount of money from the advisory work, it was called like a waterfall. So if they made above, just for round numbers, say you made above $1 million, you'd split 50-50. The first $1 million goes to you and the second $1 million's 50-50.
Gotcha.
Right? And those weren't the numbers, but we had a waterfall kind of economic ladder that we had put in place that said, okay, the advisory business could be good from a cash flow standpoint, and we'll let you into kind of the private equity world, and we'll give you the ability to help raise on, you know, Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners, Rosemont Realty, Rosemont, you know, whatever the fund that we're kind of in raising for or investing for.
What was Rosemont making its money from at this time during the maybe first term of the Obama-Biden administration?
Yeah, the first term, we made money from Rosemont Capital, which was it was $100 million co-investment fund. We also had a TALF fund that was government encouraged, I would say, as opposed to subsidized, for asset-backed securities out of the financial crisis. So that was a big moneymaker. And then the biggest moneymaker was Rosemont Realty. So we had bought in May 10th, 2010, we acquired a company called BGK out of Santa Fe, and it was a multi-tenant office real estate company. Had a fairly significant portfolio, and then we ended up raising a lot of capital around that. But we had 200 employees and managed a lot of like kind of B, A- office properties around the world.
Oh, so you would these weren't just assets on a sheet. You would actually go to the places and hire the super.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a management team. Like 200 employees.
It doesn't seem like any of that is necessarily affiliated with the fact that you have the vice president's son on board.
No, and I mean, out of that, some of the benefits which he was compensated for, he did raise. You know, we raised about 400 million in equity and bought about 2 billion in real estate. And out of that equity, he raised probably 20 million of it. So small amount, but
5% of the equity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you never, you know, hindsight's, not 2020 in this case, because we did raise that capital, but you don't know because his name was on the advisory board in 2011 that was sure. But so was Bill Richardson, and so was any other kind of fancy
former
people
New Mexico governor.
Yes, exactly. Any fancy people that we could attract that just gives people the sense that this is stable. Nothing bad's going to happen here. And that was a very, you know, it was a successful run. We purchased it in May 2010 and sold it August 31st, 2015.
Okay. So here I am. I'm owning a building in New Mexico, maybe Better Call
23 states. 23 states.
But maybe Better Call Saul's, maybe his strip mall's actually something I own.
We did have a couple of those.
So then it's like, you know what the next play is? Ukraine. Well, take me there. How'd you get to Ukraine?
Yeah, that was another interesting one. So how do we get there? So in the process, and there is actually a segue. It sounds, you know, on the question that there wouldn't be, but there's an interesting segue.
Spin a globe. And put a finger. Yeah.
So what happens is in that time pre Maidan, right? We are
the Maidan Revolution.
Yeah, the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine. So in that time,
this is turn the current state
exactly,
of
which we orchestrated.
That's a joke, right?
I don't know.
Okay,
but so what happens is, in the world of looking for capital, there's obviously the continued effort to kind of crack the institutions, the pensions, the various, kind of traditional investors in private equity. They have buckets of private equity. But in that time, as like an emerging, boutique manager, where we're not Blackstone, we're not, KKR at the time, even though they were nothing like they are right now. You'd go and look for, alternative suitors that were big pools of capital. And in that, we'd go all over the world looking for, and it's hard to kind of talk about it, but at the time, oligarchs were being, they were being solicited by, I was at dinners with Steve Schwartzman and all of the,
from BlackRock,
Apollo, KKR. I remember hosting a dinner at the Four Seasons with the CEO of Chevron and the president of Kazakhstan, with all of the, the titans of industry, the barbarians and the new barbarians at the gate.
Right.
Where it was, really pre-Maidan, there was a sprint to find investors all over the world. And a lot of the low-hanging fruit was in Eastern Europe, in Russia, in Ukraine, various pools in Asia, Southeast Asia. And so people were, you were out there. We solicited Western European, family offices as well, because it was always, okay, we have like in our pitch with Rosemont Realty, and I'll get to answer your question, but the pitch in Rosemont Realty is like, invest in our, very safe, private equity like returns. I think we had a slide that said the world's strongest army, or navy, that control all shipping lanes. Something so simple. But when you're pitching, you're saying, okay, you want stability, you want kind of inflation hedged US dollar denominated real assets, right? Because you live in Argentina, we also did Latin America as well. Inflation is that's an animal that they deal with on the every day,
right,
of every decade,
right?
And so a US, real asset that's dollar denominated that pays a dividend was very attractive. So we'd go where we thought the interest was, and we ended up.
And part of pitching that safety was who you're affiliated with.
Right.
When you say we have the Navy backing us, it's not Rosemont, but if the people on your board are some of these names, it seems more legitimate for a small company than someone without those names.
Right.
On their board.
And it's certainly a wild narrative to pitch in the not wild. It's a wide gap of narrative to pitch. It's not like we have any, particular that an office complex, the World Trade Center in Denver, which we owned, would have any, of the most landlocked.
Kind of grandiosely named, the World Trade Center.
It was part of the same development as the World Trade Center. We actually ended up renaming it the Future Energy Center.
Okay, yes, that's more plausible.
That was so anyway. So there were that narrative, certainly him on the advisory board and out there actually trying to generate meetings was useful. But what happened is we you find your way through placement agents, which are these different like consulting groups that help private equity funds raise capital. And one particular fund formation council, which was called Greenberg Traurig, had put us in a meeting. It was kind of like a bake off. I was one of maybe 8 funds that came through, and Greenberg had set up this meeting with this company called Tri Global, right? And Tri Global was one of their most famous clients was Rudy Giuliani. And booked a lot of his business in Ukraine and Russia, et cetera. And so they were focused on the East and Poland. They were focused kind of on Eastern Europe into Russia. Russia was almost considered, Moscow was a European city at the time.
Right.
Again, pre-Maidan.
Yeah.
And so we did this bake off. This company, Tri Global, ended up picking us and saying, well, we have $1 billion of capital to raise, and or $1 billion of capital that wants to be invested in the United States. We're interviewing all these funds, and we want you. We think, and obviously, I think they looked at the fact that they dealt with Giuliani. I like this element of kind of this like political halo, and I think they saw Hunter on, and that could have, and that's why I say when hindsight's not 2020. Would we have raised all of the capital? Maybe we would have raised only 200 without Hunter, but just the fact that he was there, it kind of lent to this brand.
So Tri Global, which I have heard of, they are a fund that does business with Giuliani's fund.
They're in the simplest term, they would be like a placement agent consulting firm.
So one of their clients is Giuliani.
It was,
and one of their clients is you.
Is yes.
Now becomes you.
Realty.
Right.
Becomes
Okay.
Rosemont Realty.
So there's a connection. So maybe since Giuliani winds up being the source of many of the accusations, maybe he has more insight than just, someone
Absolutely.
reading
Right. He's not just reading the tabloids or Breitbart or just the news. Yeah. I think I think that there was though no meetings happened. We were just another client.
Oh, between you and Giuliani. I get that.
That didn't,
right. No,
that didn't happen.
but this is interesting to note. So,
well, wait, let me finish the thought. So the question goes back to how do you find yourself at Burisma? And so during this entire period from May 2010, I was the general partner of Rosemont Realty. It was, the main thrust of what I was doing on the day to day. And what I was leading was really the fundraising so that our team could come back, process, they'd be processing information, finding, running the numbers, essentially finding the best undervalued opportunities that could be leased up and essentially sell those buildings or refinance them and return capital to your money. So I was out. And Tri Global picks us, we hire them, and then they basically organize a roadshow for us. And the roadshow, stopped in Warsaw, stopped in Kiev, and stopped in Moscow. And we had some success. We ended up raising out of the 400 million in equity to raise, about 150 came from Russia, Ukraine. We also ended up in Kazakhstan, which we didn't end up raising any capital from. But we worked very closely there, and I worked very closely with the Kazakh government setting up their sovereign fund. But so that's how we end up in the geography of the Ukraine because we are out there pitching our wares, really, with the flip books.
And who would invest in you? What we call now oligarchs.
Oligarchs. We'd call family offices. At the time
they have the equivalent of family offices.
Yes, ultra high net worth individuals. Yes, family office, absolutely. Family offices. Family office is like a nice term for you're in the U.S. You're an ultra high net worth individual, and you're an oligarch in the Eastern Bloc, and so. One of the pitches that we had was Zolszewski, who's the owner of Burisma. And so I pitched him with a Rosemont Realty flip book. Hunter had long been removed from the pitch book at the time, but I do think he had earlier versions and knew the connectivity there.
Why was he removed?
He was removed when he had the cocaine scandal.
Okay.
And got kicked
so
out
he wasn't helping you at this point.
No,
that's why he was removed.
He was removed.
Yeah. I'm also hazy on, you said you had a very sober lunch. When did his addiction kick in?
It's hard. The addiction, like it's a wind up, I guess, as opposed to an unwind, to pick up on the term. But I think that the addiction went off the rails when his brother died.
Right.
Which was May 2000. I don't want to get the date wrong.
This is exactly what Joe Biden did in the Robert Hur interview. He remembered the date, but he forgot the year.
Forgot the year, exactly. It gets a little blurry. 14.
Right. Yeah.
And so so leading up to that, there were some, he had been sober for quite some time. And then there were Miranda Devine probably knows this better than me, but
she's the post columnist.
Who's written 2 books. Right. And so it starts to have episodes. And I actually remember the first episode. I don't remember the date. I should probably do some, but I like to forget most of this. The dates are faded. But I do remember we were flying back. We were working on a renewables project for an investment in Spain. And he was upgraded to first class, and it was an all business and first class plane, but he had the Secret Service, so they, upgraded him to first class, and I was in business class, and the stewardess offered him a flight attendant offered him a Bloody Mary. Would you like a Bloody Mary? He didn't ask for it. And I guess that was like the straw.
You started drinking.
I started drinking
in first class,
and that was probably in 2012.
Did you go up to first class and see him drinking?
No, I did not. No. And he caught a connection to DC, so I never saw him again. But I ended up going down to the DC office like a week later.
Yeah,
this is maybe we return on a Friday, and I go down there on a Thursday, and I went to the office and. Eric Schwern or Rob Walker were like, no, Hunter's at, McSorley's Tavern or whatever it was on Washington Street. I forgot the name of and I was like, is that the bar? And I was like, that's weird. And then I went to the restaurant, and he was upstairs, and he clearly had a drink, and he was in a great mood. He's the best hunter I'd ever seen. He was not grumpy, smoking less. But it was, unfortunately that was, so he must have been drinking since that time, and then he was sober, and then so it was pretty dark. And
but you remove him from your materials because why? His escapades start making it into the press?
Yeah, well, I think that he was actually removed from there was a Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners, which was like a venture kind of, again, we're a boutique, but multi-strategy. There was they actually, the partners there, one of which was me, actually removed him as a partner and his equity from that particular. In realty, he didn't have any equity. He was just on the advisory board. He had an agreement that money that he raised, he would get paid for.
So what was an asset now had become a liability,
yes.
And you moved on as best as you could from him. And this is when
we didn't move on from him. It was not like it wasn't public.
Yes, the whole idea is the halo of these
was not helpful.
Yes, it stops becoming a halo. It starts becoming something closer to devil horns. We get it. Exactly. Now you're in. You meet with Burisma, or you do a deal with Burisma.
Right. Well, I pitched Burisma. Yes. This is to give you some. I do know this in March 4th, 2014. I'm in Moscow. And I was in Miami, flew to New York. I fly from, and this is, Maidan had happened, and Yanukovych was, taking his helicopter, but no one knew it was happening. I fly to close a deal in Moscow with a big investor for Rosemont Realty, unrelated to Zlochevsky. When I land, Putin had invaded or liberated Crimea, depending on what side of the fence you're on. And, what I see on the news at Shmedvedyev Airport, or however you, pardon my pronunciation, was John Kerry saying, Crimea has been occupied.
Right.
And so I get to the meeting where we're closing a very large deal for Rosemont Realty. And basically it was like, guys, deals off.
Yeah.
That's like, in more cliche terms, you'd think there'd be 2 glasses of vodka, but they actually poured scotch.
And you rewrite it.
So we sat there. We sat there that March 4th, and it was like I'd had PricewaterhouseCoopers in my office in New York and Santa Fe for a year doing due diligence on every property, ground up, and basically this geopolitical event we were going to go, from 1 to 10, right?
Thank God for the force majeure clauses, right?
I mean,
but no, you lost all
we
the
lost,
money.
we didn't sign. So we lost that entire deal. So that evening, I'm like, okay, back to the drawing. Well, let's just raise Rosemont Realty. We were kind of in parallel as a hedge, raising our first fund was Rosemont Real Estate Acquisition Fund 1.
Yes.
And very cleverly named Rosemont Real Estate Acquisition Fund 2. Was already been booted. We had some soft commitments if we didn't close this deal, right, that we've been working on for a year. And so I ended up having coffee with Zlochevsky, who had gotten the pitch book because Tri Global had taken them through New York, but I was away at the time and never met them in New York, and had the pitch book in 2012.
Okay, so he
had some familiarity.
Mykola Zlochevsky is the owner of Burisma. He's your fallback.
Yes, he's one of the we're not thinking about him for a multi-$100 million investment like we were, that day before Crimea. But it was okay, let's stack up $20 million commitments. This guy might be interested to diversify and put 25 million into our real estate program, Rosemont Real Estate Acquisition Fund 2. So I go and pitch him. I'm at the roof of the Hyatt in Moscow, and I'm there with my pitch book, my Rosemont Realty pitch book. And I remember he had some type of Ulysses Nardon watch on that was, probably like a $500,000 watch. And it was, the second hand was an oil drill, pounding. And I was like, whoa, this is so on brand. It was right out of a Bond movie. I was like, oh my God, this guy's the real deal.
Oh, Mr. Archer, I expect you to die.
So that's what I pitched him. And so
what is the business? How are you? Yes. Tell me, describe the business.
Well, I know this is the longest answer to any question you ever had.
But, there's a lot of
content there. So I'm still answering the question. So the answer is I pitch him. He says, oh, that's interesting. meeting, you know, and we have a tri-global partner there who's kind of translating. His English is not great. And he said, President Kwasniewski of Poland just joined my board. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. I'd love to meet him one day. And he's like, do you mind if I put you in touch with our corporate secretary? We have our coffee, a couple espressos. He's like, oh, yes, this real estate looks great. You know, wonderful. I can make, 10% returns. So I'm sure he's eye rolling, but he's like giving me kind of an audience. And he says, and also we've done like a Kroll report on Burisma. It's very clean, yada, yada. I'm like, okay, great.
The president of Poland assured you this.
Yes.
This is what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay, so he's like, the president of Poland is on my board. Former President Kwasniewski is on my board. Zolszewski is saying, we've done all this work and we're aligned for, Ukrainian energy independence and all this sounds great. And then we leave it at that. There's no talk about the business of Burisma. And so we walk out of that meeting. I have a dinner with someone else and it was really nice. And book a flight to Vilnius, where my ancestors are from, my great grandfather.
Mine too.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good Lithuanian.
Mine were my great granduncle Shmerky Kazerginski was a partisan of Vilnius.
Ah, yes. Really?
Yeah,
oh my God.
Fought the Lithuanians and the Germans. Anyway,
yes, exactly. So I'll tell you, there is a good side quest on that. It's a great story, but so I get on. I think a group. It wasn't even a group. It was his corporate secretary Vadim Poljeski ends up WhatsApping me out of the. Can I take your number? Can we be in exchange? And I said, okay, great, yeah. And Vadim, really because the conversation can flow. He's natural English speaker, and he says. And then also through the tri-global guy, the partner there, they start to say, well, Kwasniewski has joined the board. So maybe even that evening or like the next day, I'm in a WhatsApp chat. Would you be interested in joining the board?
Okay.
So it happens very quickly. Yeah. And I'm like, Kwasniewski just joined the board. Would it be something you would consider? They didn't ask me there, but there would be something like, have you done other board seats? There's a conversation that's happened. I leave, fly to Vilnius. Find my great grandfather's birth certificate, found his name. Wow. Actually, which was pretty amazing. So I will take
Is this the Archer side of your family?
No, this is the
Jewish side of your family, just like mine. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we find out we never knew his name. His name was Felix. And my wife was pregnant with a boy at the time. So our son is named Felix.
That's awesome.
And we arrived there on March 5th. 2014, and his birthday was March 5th, 1898.
Wow.
I know. So I was there on his birthday, the prime minister's office, they were all having this, and it was also my son's birthday. So a lot of,
did he make it out, by the way? Great Felix, great grandfather?
Yeah, Felix with a K, KS. Yeah. Felix with a KS, he made it out in 1929. So before, it was I think the Russians were too rough on them.
I know. The Lithuanians have always had to deal with both of them, and then the native Lithuanians weren't too kind.
No, they were. It was you've been to that museum. Have you been to Vilnius?
I've never been to Vilnius.
It's pretty. It's pretty gripping. Anyway, so this materializes, and then I'm scheduled to go back to Moscow because we didn't know what was happening. And then we realized it was like this, there wasn't a war breaking out. So I fly back on Thursday night. I have another meeting with the investors. It was a big bank actually, Thursday. And they're like, listen, it's too little did we know what was going to happen and all the sanctions and everything, but things were happening fast. Like this. So I did schedule to go back. Deal did not happen, but I ended up having dinner again with Zolszewski, casual, don't talk about anything. And he's like, but at that dinner, he's like, former president of Poland, Kwasniewski is going to reach out to you. And so this is now March 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever, later that week. And I'm back in New York by Friday. And I get on to a group with Vadim, who's the corporate secretary of Burisma, Kwasniewski, and we're having a chit chat. And he said, would you fly over to Warsaw in the next week? I have something to ask you. And I said, okay. And and I fly. So I get a LOT airline, beautiful new 787. I flew over there for a day, went to his office, and he's like, I wanted to ask you to join me on the board. This is like, we're in a new era. There's energy independence we need to focus on. We're going to be cut off from Russia, and Ukraine needs this. And, and the pay will be good.
So it's,
there it is. So that's a very long answer to your question.
But there's a lot lining up here. You think you're doing a good thing.
Right.
Beyond the fact that you think you're doing a potentially remunerative thing, which is why you do it.
Right.
But you have legitimate people, former president. He's not under sanction or anything. No. He's a legitimate guy. Burisma has what reputation at this point? Or
Burisma has just completed a Kroll report that like gives them a clean bill of health.
Right.
I'm shown that Kroll report. And I immediately say, okay, I'll do this, but under the conditions that I hire this a law firm that I'm close with to do this, what we call the Nardello report, which was this additional report. And Hunter
to satisfy what, U.S. law?
Yeah, the basic really U.S. and global law. Are they abiding by it? Give them a clean bill of health. And so I don't know how. I mean, it's kind of funny. You end up paying this. What are they going to tell you? No,
I know.
it's kind of stupid.
It's like a lot of these regulators are
exactly.
like they give you pay and then you get the bill of health.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I guess an audit, there is some.
I guess there's some vulnerability to them if it all blows up,
right?
And then the Nardello report looks a little shaky,
right? Exactly. So we hire Boy Schiller, Boys engages Nardello. Nardello starts creating the report, and the reason I brought Boys in because Hunter was of counsel. And, I've got this great opportunity. Why, this would be he's getting paid a flat salary from Boys. And I say, this would be, good for you in the sense that it shows that you're bringing clients in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And kind of leave it at that.
Right.
And that's
right.
He gets credit.
A tough time and he gets credit.
Exactly.
And also let's in your own self-interest rehabilitates him a little bit.
Exactly.
Right? Gets him back in the swing of things in terms of being a legitimate business person.
Right.
And so for how long do things go well?
Okay, so it's very quick. He's of counsel at Boys. Boys is engaged. The Burisma teams flies to DC. We have a big meeting and we start the commissioning of this Nardello report, which is these giant binders that still live in my office here in Brooklyn. And that's all going swimmingly. And Hunter's playing that role of counsel, who's like the introductory counsel. And things are going well for, I'd say, a month.
A month.
So a month or maybe 2 months.
Okay.
So it's March, beginning of March. This all happens very quickly. I joined the board. April is all, the of counsel stuff, the Nardello report.
So by summer 2014.
Yeah, by May, we are at a conference at Villa d'Este in Lake Como, Italy. It's like a World Economic something or some boondoggle. And we're there, half interested in listening to some economists talk about nothing that ever impacts anything. And Vadim gets wind that we're, through the Tri-Global guys that we're up in Lake Como. And, Nikolai Zolszewski has some medical appointments in Milan or somewhere. And basically, or in Germany, it was in Germany, sorry. And we'll fly over there and meet you. And so they fly over, meet us up at Lake Como, and I'm like, okay. And
to me, this is a world I don't understand. Business associates in Germany. Oh, you're in Milan. We got to fly over.
We're north of Milan. We're Lake Como. Yeah, exactly.
And he's like doing what? Like doing the blood spitting that A-Rod did?
Of course. There's something we don't even know about.
Okay.
So he's doing, exactly. God knows. So he's doing something there. And so he flies in, and I remember this vividly. I was like sitting kind of on this beautiful terrace at Villa d'Este with like the doors open and this kind of elegant downstairs, maybe breakfast room, very ornate. And like, it's a beautiful day and it's gotta be, May, mid-May. And and Hunter's there and I see Zolszewski and Vadim take a walk down towards the Lake Como, and I see that like the sun is glistening, and I just remember being like, oh God, this is not going to be good. I know what's happening here. And that was the time they made the offer, said, can you speak to, same kind of protocol, can you speak to President Kwasniewski? Would this be something would you like to join the board?
To Hunter.
Allegedly.
Yes.
I was at a distance of, probably 200 meters or something like that. But I remember that walk down. I was like, okay. I was like, this is going to be interesting.
Right. So Hunter joins the board of Burisma.
In the same type of, it wasn't immediate. It wasn't Zolszewski and Vadim that asked. It was Kwasniewski. They were smart.
This makes huge international news.
This makes huge. And
the red flag is that even though the Kroll reports and everything else said that Burisma was a legitimate enough company, what was the perception?
Well, the perception was then cut to maybe June or July of that year. So it's fine. He joins the board. He's got it now. He's got his compensation, which is great. And he's even happier. Right. But also probably fueling some bad behavior with having that kind of disposable income. But it is also, this time that was, his brother was, so his brother must have died in 15, I guess. Because 14, he was desperate for money to pay for medical bills and all that kind of stuff.
His brother, brain tumor. And
exactly. And his brother was just like an unbelievable guy. And it's really
knew
sad.
Bo, by the way.
Yeah.
You know him pretty well.
Incredible dude. So sad to see that. So it was 15. So that he passed in, so basically, we're humming along. It's not in the press. So and at some point I'm in the White House with my son.
Okay.
And we're doing a paper mache project, right? For I think he was 8 years old at the time. And the vice president was like and he was describing his project. He had a little tweed blazer on. It was very cute. And they have a great interaction, and someone Hunter or someone posted the video or posted some pictures, or I don't know if they posted the pictures or sent them to Vadim or something like that. And there's like a picture of, my son's obviously at my waist, and it's me and the vice president, and I'm on the board of Burisma. Burisma immediately takes that picture and posts that to their website.
Right.
So it's like Devon and the vice president in the White House. He's our board member. And it was quickly taken down, but not before the media got it. And I remember because we were in Doha at another, Economic Council boondoggle with one of the young princes. And basically it just blew up. It was like the most Googled news story for 18 hours.
And I just want to be clear and obvious. The reason that this is a scandal or a mini scandal is you have the vice president of the United States, Joe Biden, at this time was tasked with rooting out corruption in Ukraine.
Correct.
And was Burisma said to be a corrupt company or just a company run by a former oligarch in Ukraine?
I think, well, they were at the time, they were not to be corrupt. I mean, I don't know if there's a company in Ukraine that's not corrupt though.
Right.
After,
and
again,
people who understood the situation then knew this. And so him being on the board and you being on the board of a company, a large company in a country that Joe Biden was in charge of rooting out corruption in is, as they say, not a good look.
No, it wasn't a good look.
Yeah,
it was terrible. It was a terrible look. And best laid plans. Again, there are a lot of things that happened in a row that were I set it in motion, but he couldn't control it. And then that's when it became so they take that picture down, and then basically the Russians do get their mitts into this. Obviously, Burisma was less of a threat in actuality. Burisma only had one customer. Our customer was ArcelorMittal. So we were the biggest privately held gas producer in Ukraine. But we only sold commercially. So Kazmuni gas Naftagaz, which is the state provider, provides all the retail gas, and we sold all to ArcelorMittal and Mariupol. So for very, very energy intensive steel smelting and all their industrial business in the east.
So it was a monopsony situation.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was not. It was a. Is that what a monopsony means? When you only have one customer?
That's what it is.
Got it.
It's like the inverse of the monopoly.
The inverse. Yeah, it wasn't a monopoly. So it was.
Your economist at Lake Como didn't tell you?
I missed that lecture.
Yeah. That's all interesting.
Yeah.
This doesn't look good, but I think that there's a leap from all of that to Burisma being a company that is under legitimate investigation for corruption, and the person who was supposed to be investigating that was the prosecutor at the time, Victor Shokin.
Yes.
Right. And Joe Biden is supposed to be the person riding herd over the question of corruption in Ukraine.
Right.
So when does I want to take this in parts.
Mm-hmm.
When do you hear that anyone is investigating Burisma as a corrupt company? Anyone legitimate? Let me say it better. You have this vision of Burisma. We're doing a good thing. I'm going to make money off it, but this is what a former Soviet republic modernizing needs to do. This is all to the good. When do you start saying, this seems maybe like it is a corruption play?
Right. So it happens. So we're dealing with, and I just these time blocks. It's like quickly up there. We think we're doing a great thing, or we're thinking we're doing a good thing. This is energy independence, Ukraine. Like let's give these guys something to stand on and help them kind of navigate the world. And they're a very profitable company. And then we have the inflection point where it all goes, oh my God, this might be a big disaster. Was in Doha when they posted that picture and then the news story. And I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? But at the same time, I believed in the company and the guys but
the question I have is, obviously Hunter's on the board and Hunter's working with you because he's a Biden and he's a Hunter, and there's the halo effect. And then there's also this question of signaling. It's like, part of it is that the name association as opposed to just the skills that he brings to it. So I'm not saying that's corrupt, but why does hiring him on the board or showing it publicly, why does that take it to a different category?
Well, I just think I think in this case, if you look at the boards of all these companies, across, Europe, Eastern Europe, to a lesser extent, Asia, but certainly in Latin America, everybody uses former White House officials and congressional officials to be on their board to help them have the conversations that keep them, out of trouble. So it was just that to this degree, you had a kind of, somewhat, had a fairly volatile individual who had been in this, in this space of lobbying. And he's also the next of kin under Secret Service protection of the vice president of the United States. Right. So it's great. It would be great to have the former secretary of state or the former deputy, secretary of treasury. But when you take it to that place where every news, media person, every researcher, every, closet,
I understand.
It's like it just got too close. It was just too high.
Do you think then that Zlochevsky overplayed his hand? He didn't understand what he was dealing with?
Well, I think Zlochevsky played his hand perfectly because he's living in Cyprus now. He's not under arrest. He's probably made billions of dollars. He's like, taken Burisma, split it into 8 different parts that his kids own.
But what was ideal for Burisma to have done? To have Hunter on the board, but not to publicize it?
I mean, in hindsight, I think if Shokin wasn't fired, that he would have taken Burisma down.
Yeah, okay, so let's get to that. Shokin is investigating Burisma. What do you know about Shokin?
Yeah, Shokin at some point, I remember getting like an APB, alert. It's hard to place it in time, but there was a good period even after the Doha release and knowing, and Hunter, it becomes public that he's on the board. There's like a calm period, and in either Laptop from Hell or The Big Guy, I know the date exactly. Maybe it was fall of that year. So late 14 or late 14 or maybe beginning of 15. Things are calm and we're making advancements. We're doing some pretty incredible things, like open Burisma in Kazakhstan. Burisma geothermal in Italy, we're expanding, we're becoming a global company. We're looking for, outside capital, and this is great. This would be the next. I think there's some.
We got a Burisma across ridiculous from the Barclays Center.
Exactly. We're going to sponsor.
We got them in a food court.
We're going to hit tap up USAID. All the normal stuff. And basically, I think there's some ridiculous email. I'm like, this could be the Exxon Mobil of Eastern Europe.
Oh God.
I know, it's incredible that every email I've ever written is in the public domain, but it is what it is. And so at some point, in between, early 15, through the rest of 14 and early 15, there is an APB that Shokin is investigating us and this is bullshit. And, Ambassador Pyatt said some negative things about us. And it becomes, how do we influence? What do we do? How do we combat this? Because we're totally legit. You saw it in the Kroll report. You saw it in the Nardello file. I don't know what they're investigating. And then there was a question of a 23 million pound bribe that was frozen in UK courts. That was sent to an Indian official. ArcelorMittal is an Indian company. And so in the kind of Shokin, this $23 million frozen account plus this Shokin, pending investigation kind of bubble to the surface, at some point after July of 2014 and early 2015. I don't know the dates exactly.
Internally at Burisma, what was the conception of the Shokin investigation? How dangerous was it?
They would never allude to us of how they were strong with their language that we need to fix this, but they would certainly never. There was never we did something wrong and we need to fix it. Right? There was no
we need to handle this.
We need to handle this situation. This is just noise. We need to handle it.
Does handling it mean taking care of Shokin or neutralizing the investigation?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Yes, and this is where it gets crazy nuanced because it was we need to neutralize Shokin. We need to answer all his questions. And I believe that the main Shokin issue was tax related.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a I think that the heart of that issue was a Nikolai Zlochevsky tax issue related to Burisma, that he wasn't paying his share, whether it was corporate tax or personal tax. I'm not really sure how that tax system works, but that was like at the root of it. The corruption was in the fact that they weren't, rewarding the government. Right. And so we need to handle this. We need, former ambassadors speaking well about Burisma. We need more halo effect from the United States.
And it wasn't even, we just need compliance.
No, because we did nothing wrong. Obviously, that's their position is we did nothing wrong.
Right.
And we don't.
And what do you think now? Do you think they did, or
do I think I'm sure he didn't pay his taxes, and I'm sure he's trying to make it go away, and how that investigation at the end of the day, the 23 million from in London did get unfrozen.
Yes,
so they actually got that capital back.
But wasn't that part of why they hired you to do that, to unfreeze it, to work the levers?
I mean, the levers were like, other than brand, that we didn't really do anything.
Okay,
but we did what we ended up doing. We ended up hiring an actual almost like a messaging. We had a couple different firms, like a messaging operating strategic advisory firm in DC called Blue Star. And they started, having some of those meetings, really having meetings in, from Treasury to the White House to whatever, to essentially advocate for Burisma and say, Burisma is doing this and we need energy independence in Burisma. And that was kind of the call line.
So Burisma, the board is legitimately worried about the Shokin investigation.
Yes.
So this would indicate that Shokin is not bought off or corrupt at this point.
At this point, right.
Okay, so that's at some point, because I have heard you on your Tucker Carlson interview, I got a different impression that you said that internally Burisma viewed Shokin as taken care of.
Yes.
Now, what is that? I guess things change, but tell me what exactly that means that he was taken care of.
So in the post-op, this is you have to understand the timeline's very, very different. In the post-op, Shokin gets fired, and we're immediately, maybe the next day, saying, oh, that's, whether it was to just me or it was me, Hunter, and, but to me, the messaging was, oh, that was bad that Shokin got fired. Because I think they were thinking that, I think it was good in like actuality when you look back. But what they were saying to me immediately after is, oh, we didn't want Shokin fired.
Who's they? The Burisma officials?
Vadim and the Burisma officials.
Were they lying to you?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I believe so.
They were saying we didn't want Shokin fired.
We already
this is a bad
he was already taken care of. Yeah.
But you think they did want Shokin fired?
I do. In hindsight.
And that's what Joe Biden insisted on.
It's just I don't think the world is, as complex as, I think it was just hidden in plain sight, right? Or not even hidden in plain sight. It was in plain sight. I think that Shokin was a problem. And I think that he was fired because he was in the way of Burisma's success.
Okay.
Right? And he was in the way of Zlochevsky, and Zlochevsky had a lot of money and a lot of power. But I do think it was smart for them to, hit me right away and say, oh, that was not a good thing. Cause they were like, oh my God, he got fired. And
okay.
Joe Biden said it publicly.
I want to dwell on this a little bit because this is a major component of if there was corruption involved in what Joe Biden was doing. And we talk about how to define corruption. Here's a guy who was in charge of rooting out corruption in Ukraine. His son was working for a major Ukrainian firm that was under investigation. Mm-hmm. But at the time that they fired the prosecutor, who the Atlantic Council and others were calling for being fired for being a corrupt prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Maidan protesters had called him as corrupt, and also his crackdown and killing people involved in the, His crackdown on the Maidan protests put him in bad stead with many democracy activists in Ukraine.
He was a big enemy of
enemy of democracy activists.
Atlantic Council.
Yeah, and Joe Biden was saying a big enemy of an anti-corruption effort. I understand that's a double negative.
Right.
He was corrupt.
Right.
And because he wasn't properly investigating Burisma, that was a sign of his corruption in the Joe Biden framing of things.
Right, exactly.
The moment he was fired, if he was really a corrupt guy who was bought off by Burisma, you would have expected the Burisma people to say, shit, the guy that we have in our pocket was fired.
That's what they did say.
And that's what they did say. Now, was Hunter saying that too?
No.
Did Hunter know? Did Hunter and your other American partners?
Yeah, of course they knew he was fired. Right. That was big news because.
No. I mean, did Hunter have visibility into what the real arrangement with Shokin was?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay.
I don't. I mean,
so that's interesting.
I think that it was simpler than that. I think Hunter probably advocated to his father that, we need, Burisma's great. This is a gravy train for the family. And then that dovetailed with the Atlantic Council and all of the, the entire Democratic Party of Europe, who was kind of the backer and the NGOs of this. It dovetailed with, this is a two birds with one stone. Everybody wants this guy fired. He's investigating Burisma. Let's just get him fired.
Yeah. But the investigation actually doesn't go away. I mean, with Shokin, right? It intensifies.
It does not go away because they end up, and this is it. And then my tenure kind of passes after early 2016. But yeah, then Burisma ends up getting caught with a tax bribe in cash, which again, there's so much nuance in this that whether Zlochevsky, that was like a setup. I mean, I've heard so many different stories.
Burisma people were saying, oh shit, he's fired. Hunter was saying to you, oh shit, he's fired. And you think that was all an act?
I think that, I do in hindsight.
Yeah.
I think it was an act.
But you have no way of knowing.
I have no way of knowing.
Yeah.
No way of proving it. I just see that it was.
You're kind of thinking about the stories and which story makes the most sense.
Right. And I think like in that time, I think that though the investigations intensify into Burisma later on, every month that they stay open, they're throwing off hundreds of millions of dollars out of the ground. Right.
Yeah.
So the fact that, and I said it earlier, like Zlochevsky, I think did play. It was probably not as elegant as he thought it was going to turn out, but I think the brute force of having the vice president's son on his board let them kind of plow. It's like some of those monster trucks that have to plow, the plow through the mud.
Right.
Like I think they got almost a full way across the field.
And did Hunter make money on that? Did you all make money on that for the months they were open afterwards?
Yeah, because Hunter was paid. I think he was on the board until 2018 or 19.
Yeah.
So every year that went on was another $1 million in salary. So I think his salary was cut to 500.
Does Shokin seem like the guy, the kind of guy who could really bring an effective prosecution?
Well, I don't know the guy at all.
Yeah. I mean, just like his tenure. I'm trying to suss out. There are two narratives. And I've said that the idea, which is put forward by Giuliani and Trump, that the only reason that Shokin was fired was to protect Biden and Hunter Biden's interests. It may be true. Like, I can't prove it, but that's my point. You can't really prove it one way or another.
No, I think it's a combination.
And it's also plausible that he was fired just because all the democracy activists said the guy was corrupt and the Atlantic Council said the guy was corrupt. And, for years publicly, people were saying he's corrupt and no one disagreed with that.
Right.
So it could be that he was fired because he was corrupt.
Yeah, but I mean, that's like, what's a good analogy? Like saying like someone in Ukraine is corrupt. It's like try and find someone who's not corrupt.
Yeah, but
look
then
at the administration.
The problem isn't this particular
who's
action.
More corrupt?
The problem is that Hunter Biden is doing business in this intrinsically corrupt environment.
Right.
And that Hunter Biden's father is the guy in charge of rooting out corruption.
Right.
No good can come of this corrupt morass.
Exactly.
Yeah. And would you say that, I don't know, I understand how you've come to view it, but could a reasonable person?
Yeah, I mean,
do you think I'm being reasonable in saying that we can't prove that he was fired for corruption?
I can't prove it either. I mean, I think that what I said, like I do think it was an elegant dovetail. You had all this pressure from, I would say the kind of think tank of Europe, And an apparatus for the Democratic Party in Europe is the Atlantic Council, right? And the Atlantic Council was, had their panties in a bunch in regards to this Shokin, corruption, right? And whether it was from Maidan or I don't know, who else he pissed off, but they're all pushing. So it's an easy, they're aligned with Biden's aligned with them. The Democrat Party is aligned with them. So it's easy. And also it's going to help relieve the pressure. We'll give a Burisma 3 or 4 more years before they get, in trouble again or whatever. It's with any unrest or changeover in that prosecutor, the continuity of that investigation definitely took a big stall. So it let that company get. So I think maybe there was two, there's two kind of pressure points that make it a lot easier to be very forceful and vocal about that guy and holding this aid above it. I don't think Shokin was purely fired because of the investigation into Burisma, but I think that there was two very powerful forces at play that made it a very easy decision to make it U.S. policy.
Right. It could be true for both reasons. And I know under the law, if there is a legitimate motivation and a corrupt motivation, that's still considered corruption. Let's put that out there.
Yeah, there's ink in the water.
Yeah. So one of the charges, not literal, but charges against Joe Biden, and if he benefited from Hunter's business dealings and you were Hunter's partner, or vice versa. One of the main ones is, did he use his official powers as vice president to condition aid on firing the prosecutor? We've talked about that. The other was, did he get money from Hunter's business dealings? Now, part of how we evaluate this is he and his spokesman, Bates, flat out denied that he had anything to do with Hunter Biden's business. Hunter's doing whatever he's doing over there in Ukraine. He has nothing to do with it. But you are here and you told Congress that, 20 times or so you were with him?
I think that's light.
Okay, so tell me, how many times did he have calls in business meetings where it was clear that Hunter was forefronting the fact that I am the vice president's son?
Well, I think I said it initially, but and coined the term to the delight of Jordan Comer, that he was there. We were selling the Biden brand, and Hunter was selling the Biden brand. We had an apparatus of a fund and a business that made money, whether it was, in advisory, as I would kind of condition the Burisma side in, or investing. And Hunter's role was to sell the Biden brand. Right?
That is clear.
I mean,
if his name wasn't Biden, it wouldn't exist.
Right.
But I'm interested in how much did Joe Biden participate and help Hunter sell the Biden brand, besides
20
being his father and giving him his last name?
Well, I think it was conference calls.
Tell me what would happen.
Okay, tell me. We'd be at a particular instance. We're talking to a French energy company in 2012. We're at dinner and there's a view of the Eiffel Tower, and Hunter would always talk to his dad every day, and the timing of that late dinner matched up with like an evening at the Naval Observatory, and so Hunter calls his father. He doesn't pick up. His father calls back. He puts him on speaker.
Right there at the business meeting. Doesn't step outside.
Yes.
Like, this is the point.
Yes, this is the point.
And who is there to witness?
The CEO of the energy company, myself, 2 other colleagues from Miami and Europe, and a Spanish individual and Venezuelan.
Something like this happened how many times?
How many times?
Like Joe Biden live on the phone.
I used 20 because I actually did it before the testimony. I wrote down each time where I say like roughly the date within 1 week, because I would reference my calendar. So I would say if it was 20 that I can remember, it was 50 plus.
50. And would he put Joe Biden on the phone with his business partners?
Yeah, and generally on speaker, yeah.
Oh, so what would he say? Oh, Dad, I'm with
Giuseppe, and it's great here. We're going to do a lot of great stuff in France, and I think France is a great ally. And
Joe Biden would say hi.
Joe Biden would say hi.
Oh, hello, Mr. Vice President.
Mr. Vice President, it's an honor to speak to you.
Right.
And I hope you're taking care of my boy, and this is all great. And it was again, we weren't like I have said before, like Jamie Dimon going into an IPO that JP Morgan's running. He doesn't know, what the shareholder base is or the target price. Maybe he knows the target price, but we weren't talking specifics about inking a deal, but that you don't need that. It's just that this is going great. I mean, it's like I learned it, any Chinese chairman, the ones that get the most respect don't say anything. Right. So the fact that he would just say, listen, I'm behind this. He would send the signal, I'm behind this. You're with my son. This is very important to me. And, yada, yada, yada. I mean, one of the big lines that didn't come out in Congress, but Miranda ended up putting in the jacket of her book, which he would say, whether we're in person at a dinner or we're on a conference call, he'd say, you know what? You do a favor for me, you're a friend. If you do a favor for my son, you're a friend for life.
He would say that.
Yes.
He said that to the business associates of Hunter Biden.
Yes.
That's pretty
impactful.
Yeah, I would say so.
And especially, the second.
And in this whole world, it's all, as you know, it's all signals and it's all halo, and it's never going to be explicitly said.
No.
But
Exactly.
it's clear what's going on.
It's clear what's going on. And I think that the messages of that, you can't encapsulate it better than saying they were selling the Biden brand.
Yes. So you have convinced me, though I didn't need convincing, that Joe Biden was helping his son in business.
Correct.
And he was using the halo, the aura, whatever vague term you want to use, of the fact that he was the vice president of the United States to help his son in business. And I suppose that's not illegal. I shouldn't say I suppose. I don't think that alone is illegal.
I don't think so either.
Right. And it might not even be unethical, although if you're in charge of rooting out corruption in Ukraine, you might want to think differently about that. The next question is, did Joe Biden economically benefit from this? Not did Hunter benefit from Joe, did Joe benefit from Hunter? And what's the evidence of that, if there is any?
Well, I think there are just natural benefits about having a family member that is benefiting financially. There are little instances of home improvements being paid for. I wasn't in the intricacies of the wires that Hunter received would go out to Hunter or the business. How he spent that or how he shared that it wasn't in my purview. I wasn't in the finances of that, but I just think
nor did you want to be.
Right. And I think there was an element that, in the family in the earlier days, it was, father politician, Beau politician, Hunter is going to be the businessman. Like, in old Ireland, it would be like, you want a cop, a priest, and a whatever, you have the trifecta, right? There's a businessman, the cop, and the priest, and then you can control your village. Right. And so I think that, I think that Hunter was like sought to be this, business titan who was going to be the breadwinner, and Beau was going to be, running in 2020.
Right.
If not after.
Yeah. And even not to allege illegality, if you are a father, and we're both fathers, and your son, especially a son who is vulnerable, is making money, is doing well, that is exactly like you doing well. You could give him the money, or you could just make the money because of
it. It might be better, right?
Yeah.
So whether it was pride or, there's an element of pride, or that the family's doing well and they're getting the boat, or they're, helping dad buy the beach house, for riding the train for 40 years or whatever he did. But I whether there was, I don't know either way. I wouldn't be surprised if there was direct, and I think there's been a ton of investigations that have proven some of it out, quite frankly, that he received direct capital in the form of loans and checks and back and forth between the brothers and the whole, they did,
because his brother Jim was also, you were in business with him too.
No, I wasn't.
You just knew him.
I knew him and met him a couple times. But I think that the investigations that Comer has done has proven out, it wasn't graft at a large scale, or even at a Menendez scale. So a mid-level scale.
No gold bars.
No gold bars.
Yeah, no. So I would say, I don't know that there is evidence, and I've tried to look at all of it, I would not say it was proven. I would say it's suggested. And if if some forensic people want to get in there, maybe they can find something. Right. But just in terms of common sense, You have a guy who's trading on access, trading on his last name, making a lot of money from his last name, making a lot of money from his actual connection to his father, who should be in charge of rooting out corruption.
Right.
That is what that is.
That's what it is.
We could call that corruption. It might not be legal under the law, but it is what that is.
Yeah. And, you know, if and let the investigators and let that all, you know, that forensic accounting is kind of and it didn't flow through me. So it's hard for me to speculate on, you know, dollar for dollar where everything went. But I think the biggest, you know, tragedy of this whole thing is just that, and how they could have avoided is the president, the former president, just lied about his involvement. Right.
Yeah. He said
I mean, he said on the debates in 2020, I mean, I had no involvement. I remember watching the debate. I'm like, just being like, oh my God, like this is ridiculous. Like I have no involvement. I had no idea about China. I mean, he met the Chinese, he met these Chinese business partners, which is a whole nother subject, but he met Vadim for dinner twice at Cafe Milano.
You were there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were there. I mean, that was, it's undeniable.
And the Chinese were a different
That
meeting.
was in Beijing when Hunter and the vice president met with Xi and met with the BHR business partners. I mean, there's recently surfaced photos probably just before the election. But yeah, it is undeniable that, and I don't think that he would have had any of nearly, you know, obviously the laptop caused a lot of it too, but I don't, if he just was like, yes, I love and support my son and I'll do anything outside of, ink deals with him. And I don't exchange, like he could have taken a much different position.
Oh, okay. You're saying he could have said, I love and support him and I support him in business and I help him trying to be successful.
I'm his mentor.
But I know what the law is and I stop at the line of the law.
That would have been perfect. But it's just,
that had nothing to do with it.
I have nothing to do with it. I don't even know any of his business partners. I mean, I released a letter on the cover of the Post in 2023. It's like, it's a letter to me and it says, I think the headline we I think it was letter of the lie. So it's like Dear Devon with my name spelled wrong. It's Devon Devon on the top and the address is right. Then it says DVIN. Dear Devon, I just, I'm so sorry we didn't get to spend, I'm his business partner, right? So think about those lines in 2020. I mean, this is from 2012 or something. I am his business partner. I know nothing about his business or his business dealings. It is just
no. Okay, so I want to break this down.
Let me give you the letter. So
Devon is Hunter's business partner. If Joe Biden says I know nothing about his business dealings, why would Joe Biden write a letter to Hunter Biden's business partner saying, Devon, spelled wrong, it was so sorry I didn't get to have lunch with you.
Right.
I was dealing with Putin.
Yeah, no, it's not with Putin. I was dealing with the president of China.
Okay, president of China.
Exactly. I'm so sorry we didn't get to spend more time together. I was dealing with the president of China and he was so busy, and then, warmly, Vice President Biden, and then in like handwriting, it's like, I am so glad that you guys are business partners.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's you're together, but that is just, how can you have that line that where President Trump confronts him in 2020 and then know in your past, and that's just one example. That's just like a tangible where, obviously the phone calls, the conversations and this is a great opportunity for you, all of that, just put that aside. You have a letter on presidential stationery, but apologizing for not spending more time talking about your business dealings,
right.
Because I'm inherently his business partner. So, what else are we going to talk about? I mean, that's the part that like upsets me so much. And it just gives you a rotten feeling.
Now, so you're not just someone watching the debates who knows things that are contradicting what the vice president is saying. You are in their sights and they feel that they could turn the screws on you because of
absolutely
you have legal exposure because after all this Burisma stuff, you did another deal that went south.
Yes.
Was this around 2016?
Yeah. So Burisma didn't go south.
Right.
Did
Burisma
very well. Had a very good 10-year run.
Yeah.
But yes, this deal goes south. The deal goes south far before my involvement, which is and I'm not allowed to because I'm still, in the process. I can't really divulge details on this because it's it's an ongoing matter. It's something that's been going on for a decade of my life. It's, sucked the life. And
so in 2016, you issued some bonds to an Indian tribe?
This is 2014 before.
Oh, okay.
Before I am involved in the company.
Right.
But again, I can't talk
so you're
about it. So let's say there's this thing that happens that I have very little involvement in.
Right.
Other than joining the company later and being the chairman of the board. Hunter is the vice chairman of the board. I am, there's some activity that's suspicious. A whistleblower blows the whistle on Hunter's suspicious activity report. They get into this company and they find that a select group of individuals stole money from a bond issuance, right? And in that process, the investigators come. They say, you're a witness. I give everything, give all my information. And this is in like October of 2015. In, the spring of 2016, I moved from, witness to subject to target in a matter of 30 days. And then I'm, face, essentially, the most trying period of my life, which is the last decade.
And what was Hunter, who's still friends with you at this point, and business associates?
I think there's tons of, there's a ton of text and
what's he advising you to do?
He's telling me I'm a Biden and our judicial system is fair and competent.
Don't worry. He's telling you, don't worry, cooperate, and you will be found not guilty, or even if you are found guilty, you'll get a pardon. What does he say?
Well, no, he doesn't. Not that. Yeah, I have no. First of all, when the case opens, I don't even know what it's about. I didn't even know what I was getting a complaint filed against me about. It was called the U.S. versus Hugh Dunkerley, which a guy I'd never met until the arraignment.
Okay,
so I was, and my lawyers as well were in the dark. But again, let's leave that part of it aside. But yeah, I would say in broad terms, he's saying I'm a Biden. Don't worry, everything's going to work out. He has some very, there's a lot of information out there. You can go to Marco Polo if that's still up and basically find all the text and stuff of but he's saying, okay, you're going to be fine, right? In that whole process. And it just comes out much later. I found out in the last year or two that he was the initial target of the investigation. He was equally as innocent in this particular case. I mean, I was exonerated on Rule 33, in which the trial judge said I was innocent 6 times in 62 pages. Yeah. So I go through all that, but again, I don't want to.
No, but I'll just explain to the viewers. The judge said she had grave doubts about your guilt, or maybe she said
lack of intent.
Yeah, she essentially said, I think he's innocent, but they let it go to the jury decision anyway. And then the jury found you guilty. And the judge said, no, this is improper. You're not guilty. But then the appeals court retroactively found you guilty. And then the Supreme Court didn't bring it
Correct.
up. That's about where we are.
It's about it. And the nuance is that the jury decision came and then the judge filed the Rule 33.
Okay.
So,
and is there still any, aside from presidential pardons or anything like that, is there still some legal avenue by which you will be found not guilty of this?
No,
that's done.
No, that's done.
So have you served time?
No.
What do you?
No, I'm cooperating on other cases, and I have another hearing that will be scheduled somewhere.
Yeah.
In 2025.
And going in to talk to Comer and talking to the House Oversight Committee, you got credit for that cooperation.
You actually don't get credit for congressional testimony.
Oh, really?
But I think I felt like it was an important thing to do as a patriot and to help.
But for every bit of credit you get or don't get officially, do you think you're being punished by the parts of the government that are resentful of what you're saying now?
Yeah, I think it was a very difficult. I've made it through the gauntlet in a lot of sense. I mean, my life is not going to be as bad as I initially kind of thought in some of the darkest periods there while Biden was in office.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to testify, when I agreed to testify and just tell the truth, inspired
to
by
the House.
Yeah, to the House, inspired by Tony Bobulinski, for instance, who did it in 2020. I wish I did it in 2020, though I think we're in a better place now that we're, this happened in this order and everything happened for a reason. But there was some regret about not doing that in the last election when I was listening to this guy debate and just lie about me and our relationship and any interactions that we've ever had. So I felt passionate. My my loyalties were not long there. And so during the Biden administration, it was terrifying. One particular example is I agreed to testify to Congress and coin the Biden brand and all these things that basically became fodder for, weekend at Biden's. The balance of kind of the run up to him dropping out. On a Saturday, they tried to send me to prison on Saturday, the Monday before I testified.
Yeah.
Which is just, have you ever seen like a lawfare intimidation tactic beyond that? I don't know. I have a family of 3 kids, 17, 12, and 10, a wife and, a home, and have no ill-gotten gains, never made $1 on this, lost everything. And they're trying to intimidate me not to testify to Congress by sending me to prison. And then since then, my sentence has been vacated. The case has been adjourned to mid-2025. As I said, I'm cooperating in some other cases, but it was incredibly scary and, on eggshells, that entire administration, really, like a year in. I said the last three years of Biden's administration, I was just, looking over my shoulder at every corner, because his DOJ, which had, worked very closely with him as a vice president to initially move Hunter out and move me in, was now had, I would say was it scary to have Biden's finger
move Hunter out of
the original case?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's the vice chairman. I'm the chairman. He's the one investigated, and somehow I become the fall guy.
Okay. This is the theory of why they're targeting you. It wasn't anything you said publicly about your business dealings or Burisma. It was that you and Hunter were both involved in this case, and they took the focus off of him, and they needed a fall guy, and it was you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Yeah. Hunter
wasn't like mad at you. You hadn't caused caused Joe Biden any political problem. You were quiet.
No, he just wanted to obviously, as you see how they take care of their family, their family first. They pardon the entire family, retroactively for God knows what.
Yeah.
But it just begs the question, God knows what.
Yeah.
But I spent 4 years, really 3 of the last 4 years, where I was like, wait, these guys are actually really not on my side.
Yeah.
And maybe they're overtly trying to really enforce me. So it was the enforcement during his presidency, and having his two, would say he had his finger on the nuclear button, he had his 2 hands on the DOJ keyboard. And I was like terrified at every moment that they would try and, act to enforce me to go to prison, or, put liens on my homes, and, all for a case in which the trial judge spent 6 weeks and exonerated me on grounds of innocence.
Right. That's important to note. It is somewhat flummoxing to me, or somewhat confusing to me, that the motivation really was to prosecute this bond case. It wasn't to silence anyone politically, like you. You weren't saying anything politically. It wasn't to embarrass some. There were no political motivations originally. They wanted a prosecution on this bond case.
Right. I think
it was going to be Hunter, you're saying, and then Hunter threw off whatever suspicion or target onto you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but there certainly was a crime. There was money still. There was misappropriated funds from a bond issuance that I'm sure that they thought they were going to be able to work their way out of, like any Ponzi scheme or whatever. But at the end of the day, he was as innocent and unaware of this activity as I was. So it's not
does it come down to, like, when you become chairman or vice chairman, you sign something that says all legal liability beforehand accrues to you?
I think that I was the chairman I was like moved in. I'd sold Rosemont Realty August 31st, 15. I didn't even have boxes unpacked in the office that I was taking at this company.
Yeah.
The crime period was somewhere in 2014. So,
and this is totally, I assume, this is totally quashed your ability to do business.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's financial financial ruin. And I've, been slogging through this case. If I felt that I was in any way guilty, I would have taken 300 hours of community service like Hugh Dunkerley.
The guy whose name was on the case.
That's the guy whose name was on the case, got 300 hours of community service.
So obviously they wanted someone higher up.
Millions and millions and millions of dollars. And because I didn't do anything. And yeah, I'm very sorry for, having these tangential folks who came from very high level relationships in my orbit. And, it's given me a good lesson for there, but I would never, for my children and for my wife, I would never lay down to something that was so politically motivated.
How might this play out?
Well, we'll see over time. I mean, I would love to be pardoned, for having, faced all of this. I think the process is the punishment at the end of the day. I've spent, gone through this financial hardship for a decade.
Yeah.
My kids have suffered. I have 2 kids that, have never known me not being under arrest. I think that's enough to, and the fact that I was exonerated, and there's been some political football that has, kind of put me back into this after kind of, going through it is just, that's kind of I think that's the best, highest shot of justice.
What have you learned about the pardon process?
What have I learned about the process? It's like, I think the pardon process is like, it's like joining a country club. You have a nominator, and you have to flood the zone with as many people as possible. Just trying to get your
character attestations,
exactly,
that sort of thing.
Attestation. So a first in a lot of different.
But you're working with lawyers, right?
Yeah.
Are they guiding you through it? Are they saying here are the steps, or are there really steps? I know, because the question is, I know that there is like some official Department of Justice. They look over it. Yet when we hear about pardons, it's always a flood at the last minute, and it seems to be motivated by something other than the Department of Justice assiduously looking over it. So what have you learned about how it really happens?
I mean, I think it much like, I think there are, people that are, whether it's policymakers or influencers in the media, and it's really about getting your story, your story out there, very narrow cast into decision makers, but it's one of the great authorities that I think in, our democracy that's been bestowed upon the president. If you can, submit, I submit a lot of memos, that kind of explain and re-explain and
to who?
Re-explain, to get to the Oval. I mean, that's to get to the president.
Who do you submit the memos to?
I submit them to the various seconders and character witnesses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they say Devon's a good guy. And
right. But I mean, I think it's more than just a good guy. I mean,
and he didn't do it. And
well, that's in the contents of the case are very much like in the memos, right? So there's lots of different memos that you submit, and explain literally all of the nuances and all of the, there's some of it that explains the process being the punishment, and then there's others that get into the kind of the nitty gritty of the particular actions and the subsequent exoneration.
Do you think none of this would have happened if after that first lunch with Hunter Biden, you said, you know what, I'm just not feeling it?
Absolutely. It is, you're not supposed to go through life with regrets, but it is the single biggest regret in my life.
Ever going into business.
It's an absolute, it's been an absolute colossal, train wreck in regards to, he was kryptonite to nearly every business that he got involved with. I don't want to get into all that, but all of the kind of where you it gave Burisma kind of this staying power to just milk the gas out of the ground for probably a few more years than they would have, but and everything else that he touched, it was epic failures.
How much of that do you think is attributed to his addiction as opposed to his character, or just how he does business? If he were, because you said Bo was a great guy.
Yeah, Bo was a great. I think addiction play. I think that there were a lot of points that if he remained sober, through the early 2012, 13, 14, like that if his head was on straight, we would have been able to. I think that there were a lot of decisions that were made on his part and his father's part that wouldn't have been made if he wasn't kind of forcing the issue and playing too close to the line.
And your collateral damage and the wreckage that is addiction.
Exactly.
But also other things, it does seem like he had, or the family, or maybe just him, had a bit of a playbook, and the playbook wasn't strictly an ethical one, even if he was in if he was in his right mind.
It's hard. I mean, how can you know? I just think that the addiction certainly added fuel, nitrous to the fire pit.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that there's anything inherent about the business that you were in? Because, you're dealing with oligarchs, you're dealing with situations. This is how you make money. Situations that, look, if you want to have a bond that pays 3%, we could all do that. But, you take risks, you take on risk, you assess risk. So is there anything about your risk assessment independent of Hunter that you look back on and question?
No, I as far as I started my career in Asia with Citibank. I've been, at the heart of wanderlust, and I absolutely adore travel and seeing new cultures and meeting new people. And there's not one thing. There's not a business decision based on the risk. You have to understand that we were dealing with oligarchs when everyone in all of the captains of our financial industry were courting the same folks.
Yes.
And we cut it off right after March 4th. Right. And aligned around Ukraine. I don't think there's a risk decision that I would have made that would have been different. The only risk that I wouldn't have taken was thinking that Hunter Biden would be some type of asset.
Yeah. Yeah. But also we should point out that if you do business in emerging markets, you often have to, these are the players in the emerging markets. And we could talk about emerging markets like Lithuania or Estonia, where it probably wasn't that different from Ukraine, and things worked out great.
Right.
And everyone who did business with those companies, I mean, the vast majority is saying, what a great job you did. You took them from an ex-Soviet state into the modern economy, and without the capitalization of the Western markets, they wouldn't have done it.
Right.
You're a hero.
Right. And going into, I mean, Ukraine had, there were, the story has played out so much into this, and in our current state in Ukraine, into this kind of den of corruption. But at the time, it was just, it was another post-Soviet state like Poland that, Ukraine could be Poland. Ukraine could be Kazakhstan, which Kazakhstan's taken a big turn for the worse, as far as authoritarian rule. And so at that time, history plays itself out. So it's hard to say, at the time, as our risk assessment was, this is the largest privately held, natural gas company in Ukraine. Ukraine's going to need gas. Yeah.
And I have the opportunity, and the president of Poland. Think about their vulnerability after they were invaded by Russia and how much they would have needed gas. And if they do need gas, if they had a robust industry, it's
and I had no idea at the time that that wasn't selling into retail. I just was like, okay, they're producing gas and selling it on the market. I got more involved in the company and understood more. But the only the miscalculation was the engaging with Hunter.
And you're going to think I'm doing the Columbo thing. One last thing, but I did forget this. Tell me what 10% to the big guy meant to you.
10% equity to the big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did that?
We promise him he's going to get 10% of the equity.
So when I just fill me in on the details of that.
10% of the big guy was in the CEFC deal.
Yeah.
That was post my, that was when they tangled me up into our, justice system. So I was fighting my own battles, but he went on to court another Chinese partner, which I think might've been an op, quite frankly. I think we didn't talk about BHR today. We can do it another time, but the Bohai Harvest Rosemont was a private equity fund that was, stood up in China by myself. Hunter was on the board. And it was, I think that CFC was they were doing a lot of this stuff in Europe, and it made some deep inroads on connecting, Belt and Road, which was their initiative to kind of, reshape global supply chain or the global, not supply chain, but like the global routes. Right. And so
they gave money for infrastructure deals in developing countries.
Exactly.
And
5-year plan.
Yes.
Big thing.
Right. So it was their USAID.
Yeah.
USAID.
Exactly. But advertised as what it really was.
Right.
Their USAID.
No bait and switch.
Exactly. So CFC had found Hunter through I think it was like one of his daughter's lacrosse players' dads or something. They ended up connecting with him and bringing him on board, and they were going to buy natural resources, assets in the United States. I think there was they were looking at projects in Louisiana, and I think that Hunter was like, okay, you got to reserve 10% for my father, and that's pretty much what it was.
There's no ambiguity as to what that could mean?
No,
zero. When you saw it, when you first heard about it, did you know?
Yes,
that goes to Joe Biden.
Yes,
100%. Okay.
There's no it's not going to hold up in court of law. It's all hearsay, but it was absolutely a 10% share of the equity and whatever they were going to do for Joe Biden.
And I think that is more of a direct connection to Joe Biden's pocketbook than anything else. I mean, it's not direct, but that's the one sentence that would indicate that Joe Biden got money from this.
Right.
Why would he say it, though, if he's never said it before, if he knows to keep everything else at an arm's length?
I don't think I think it was 10%. I have to reference what particular quote, but I think it was 10% of equity.
Yeah.
Which was like in anything, there was, I'll give you 10% of that. And then very rarely does it manifest.
I get it. But Hunter knows not to ever imply that his dad is making money directly from this. Why was this the exception?
Well, I think his dad, if I remember time, his dad was out of office.
Okay. So there you go.
So I think he got a little looser with what was actually happening.
Right.
I think that was really, and also, I think he got a little bit more reckless with his language as kind of addiction took over.
Oh, okay. Those are plausible explanations. Hey, Devon Archer, I want to thank you for your considerable amount of time. Thank you for coming in.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man.